A new search is getting underway for the Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, which vanished without a trace more than 10 years ago.
American robotics company Ocean Infinity will lead the hunt off the West Australian coast
as they try to take on what has become an enduring mystery.
Hello and welcome to the Nexus. 239 people went down with that plane, and this search is the best chance of finally finding out why. Ocean Infinity, described as SpaceX underwater, is using autonomous vehicles and powerful new AI to locate the wreckage. The Malaysian government will pay them $70 million if they find it. Do they have a chance this time?
Yeah, I think that they've got a better chance than before.
They can't find something that isn't there.
We'll also be looking at the potential causes of the crash. Some say it had to be the pilot.
If you put everything else together, it seems to be the most logical conclusion.
But first, a quick reminder of how the news broke 12 years ago.
Malaysian 370, Lampu radar, good morning, climb flight level 250.
A Malaysia Airlines flight with 239 people on board has gone missing. A desperate search is underway.
Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 simply vanished while flying from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing.
Air traffic control lost contact with the plane about 2 hours after takeoff.
This is very rare. For an airplane to disappear is not normal. We have every reason to expect that this is not going to be a good outcome.
Malaysian 370, good night. Good night, Malaysian 370.
What happened to MH370 remains one of the greatest mysteries in aviation history.
Satellite data shows the plane mysteriously turned from its flight path to head south over the Indian Ocean, prompting theories that range from pilots to mass murder.
It's almost inexplicable.
Did batteries in the cargo hold catch fire? Did the pressurization fail?
There were no Mayday calls. In fact, there's evidence that transponders were turned off. I think this was an intentional act.
There was no proof for any of it, just scattered evidence coupled with speculation about how long the jet flew, which direction, and where it might have come down.
Some debris has in fact washed ashore. The bulk of the plane, though, and its passengers remain missing.
We can't get the answers, really, until we find the wreckage.
That's what Ocean Infinity is trying to do in the southern Indian Ocean. But are they searching in the right place? Not everyone on this panel is so sure. We have the marine salvage engineer, Nick Sloane, the former airline pilot, John Cox, and the aviation journalist, Jeff Wise. Welcome to the program, everyone. Nick Sloane, if I could start with you, you think they actually do have a good chance of finding the wreckage. Have they chosen the right area then?
Well, yeah, I think that they've got a better chance than before. So the first time they went out to look at it, they hadn't found any wreckage. And since then, wreckage has washed up on Madagascar, Mozambique, and into South Africa. And now that they're able to model the weather phenomena and the ocean currents between the time the wreckage was found and the time that the accident happened, they've actually backtracked all of the currents to show where that debris would have started from. And it is in the location that they are heading for now. So I believe there's a few other factors that they've sharpened up on the analysis from the satellite data, and hopefully that this 50,000 square nautical miles of seabed is the right place.
Jeff, I know you're not convinced by the debris and the flow of the currents theory. Why is that?
Well, there's so much about this case that is deeply strange and deeply unexpected. Now, the fact that these pieces of debris washed ashore starting 15 months after the plane's disappearance would seem to seal the case that obviously the plane must be in the southern Indian Ocean. However, it's very dangerous to make assumptions in this case. And when you look at the pieces more carefully, you notice a couple of really strange things. One of them is that not a single one of these several dozen pieces has marine life growing on it whose age matches the time since the plane disappeared. The most famous piece, the flatbron that turned up in La Réunion, the longest barnacle on that was 3.5 centimeters. That's about how long it takes them. That's how big they get in about 3 months. Now this thing it had been 15 months since the plane disappeared. So that raises the question, what was this thing doing for that missing 1 year?
Does that mean that you think it's possible somebody planted those pieces?
in the context of everything else that's so deeply strange and hard to explain, then I think we have to sort of open our minds to possibilities, as crazy as it might sound.
Okay, then let me ask you about your second objection about the search area. You suggest that the signals that the plane gave off do not just suggest that it could have gone south, it could also have gone north. Tell us about that.
So the signals that this plane generated were really baffling in many, many ways. And it took scientists a lot of time to decipher the mathematics of it. They basically just realized that there were two components to this signal. The first part was called BTO, timing data. This told them how far the plane was from the satellite. This allowed them to recreate a route that the plane would have flown in order to generate those signals. However, it wasn't just one route. For every route you could draw using this kind of data, there's a mirror image, a route that's kind of flipped around the equator. So in this case, one of the routes went down into the southern Indian Ocean. One of them went north to Kazakhstan. So at first, they didn't know which one was which. Then they used the other component of the metadata called the BFO. That required much more heavy lifting mathematically, but they ultimately decided that that signal told them that the plane must have gone south. That is the reason they're looking in the southern Indian Ocean.
John Cox, you've been involved in aviation as a pilot and as a safety advisor for over half a century. Do you accept that these signals have been potentially misread?
No, I don't. And I think that we need to clarify a couple of things. When the airplane made the turnaround, a device known as the transponder was switched off. That is an interface between radar and the aircraft. That switched off and did not come back on. There is another system primarily used for maintenance where the airplane automatically downloads information to a satellite about the status of the airplane mechanically. It's called ACARS. That system was partially disabled, but it made normal transmissions. So the assertion that this is totally unusual transmissions is not factually true. ACARS transmits on every airliner of that generation and newer on a regular basis. And the fact that the satellite manufacturer, Inmarsat, was able to use some triangulation and the timing differences that the gentleman referenced it was a first time it had been done. But this math was checked by the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board, by Boeing, by NASA, and others, and found that the mathematics, it was the first time it had ever been done. It was revolutionary, and some very bright people came up with it. But the 7 times that the ACARS transmission occurs, they line up that it's in the southern Indian Ocean.
Right.
And some of the people that I have talked to, PhDs in mathematics, I said, do you have any question in your mind that it's in the southern Indian Ocean? And the answer uniformly has been no, that's where the wreckage is.
There's some debate about the search area, clearly, but I think we can all agree that Ocean Infinity has some impressive technology and has quite a track record. Take a look at this.
Ocean Infinity has had several big discoveries since being established in 2017, including the Argentinian Navy submarine, the San Juan in the South Atlantic, Sir Ernest Shackleton's ship, the Endurance, in the Weddell Sea near the Antarctic, and the Stella Daisy, a South Korean bulk carrier that sank in 2017. The San Juan was found at a depth of 920 meters in 2018, a year after being lost. The Endurance was discovered at 3,000 meters in 2022, over a century after it sank. And the Stella Daisy at 3,461 meters, having been lost for about 2 years.
So, Nick, Ocean Infinity has a great track record. What sort of technology are they using this time round?
Yeah, so if you think of the evolution of computers, AI, the ability to do these incredibly powerful mathematical modeling, and then to analyze and, capture and then analyze data. And that's Ocean Infinity's speciality, is they know how to get low enough in the water and they've got the most sophisticated equipment out there. Certainly, right on the fringe of what's available in the world, to capture large amounts of data. And then they can actually not only capture it, but they have the AI and the software capability to actually take that data and put it through all of their mathematical models, and then to analyze that data. So this is about 10 times more powerful than when the MH370 first went missing. That's how the capability has grown. And of course, the Armada fleet is a semi-autonomous fleet. So yeah, Ocean Infinity, they're all about semi-autonomous software, data capture, AI integration, robotic engineering. It's really amazing. And they believe that they've got the capability to analyze the data. And I think everyone that knows anything about them would agree.
And it makes a big difference that they're semi-autonomous because they can be out there for a very long time. Is that right, Nick?
Yeah, correct. So the whole Armada fleet was purpose-built to be semi-autonomous and to basically run autonomously from shoreside control.
Right. Jeff, I know you have your reservations about whether or not they're searching in the right area, but we've seen that Ocean Infinity can find wrecks at a very, very deep level, 4,700 meters. How deep and difficult is the terrain this time?
Well, it's very deep. It's about 3 miles deep. It's not particularly difficult where they are looking right now. There's some terrain in the vicinity that's quite bad, but they've been able to deal with it in the past. So it's certainly very impressive technology. They go down, they take an image. Their only limitation is that they can't find something that isn't there.
And John, just a final question for this segment. Air France, I mean, when that aircraft crashed into the Atlantic in 2009, the wreckage and the black box were found just 2 years later. Why was it easier to find?
I think that the geography of the seabed is part of it, but we also knew to a much greater level of detail where the aircraft actually impacted the water. So put those together, and they were able to, using at that time leading edge technology, they were able to find the first bits and pieces of it, and then they were able to map the wreckage, which was on a relatively flat seabed. So I think the difference there is, as you point out, the geography as well as the level of certainty where the aircraft impacted the water.
Thank you. John Cox and Jeff Wise, do stay with us. Nick Sloane, thank you so much for your analysis today. Really appreciate that. Well, the investigation into the crash has still not concluded why the plane went down. A number of theories have been explored, including the possibility that the pilot was to blame.
The rogue pilot theory centers on Captain Zahari Ahmed Shah, the pilot in command. He was a married father of 3 who had been with Malaysia Airlines for 30 years. In his spare time, he enjoyed using his home flight simulator and posting DIY videos online. To all appearances, Captain Shah had no reason to end things, and yet many aviation experts insist he is the prime suspect, and they put forward 3 main reasons. First, it's believed that someone in the cockpit deliberately turned off the transponder, and just 2 minutes after, Captain Shah spoke the flight's final radio transmission. As the plane left Malaysian airspace, he said, "Good night, Malaysian 370. Now that last transmission was made around the time responsibility for the MH370 passed from Malaysian air traffic control to the Vietnamese. Experts suggest this would be the best time to unexpectedly change course without being noticed. And finally, another cause for suspicion. Investigators recovered deleted data from Shah's home flight simulator, showing a simulated flight into the southern Indian Ocean just weeks before MH370 disappeared. However, investigators say there is no conclusive evidence, and in their report they note nothing suspicious in the background, finances, training, or mental health of either Shah or his co-pilot, Farik Abdul Hamid.
We have a new guest on the panel now, Philip Baum. He's an aviation security specialist and an expert on behavioral analysis and in-flight security management. Welcome to the program, Philip. So we've just heard in that report there was nothing really suspicious in the pilot's background, but you don't agree with that, do you?
Not at all. I think it depends when you talk about background, are we talking long term or short term? In the immediate run up to the loss of MH370, I think there were a number of issues that were not exactly baseline. I mean, obviously, the most compelling bit of evidence to support that would be the fact that it appears from his flight simulator that he had been practicing certain routes, and particularly the route which we believe might have been the final trajectory of MH370. But even if we actually look more at his personal life, the fact that he was making somewhat unusual home videos showing people how to repair air conditioning systems, his political affiliation with Anwar Ibrahim, and the fact that he had been in court that day, seeing his friend sentenced, the fact that he didn't have any future life plans, the fact that it is alleged that he was actually going through marital difficulties at the time, and he was certainly had contact with other ladies for reasons that we don't know about. But certainly it's not baseline activity. And above all else, if you put everything else together, it seems to be the most logical conclusion is that it was aircraft assisted or mass murder. But no proof.
Jeff, before we move on to your theory, do you have any questions for Philip?
Well, I mean, I think that what has happened with the case of Zaharie Ahmad Shah is that people look at the circumstances of the case. They're unable to imagine any other scenario than pilot mass murder. And they decide, well, you know, there must be something there. We know that this guy had to have committed this horrible crime. And therefore, the fact that he put some comment on a young woman's Facebook page must mean that he was some kind of sex criminal pervert. I think that you're sort of putting what you believe about him into, you're sort of projecting that onto what you see of his behavior. There's actually very little known about Zaharie's behavior. There is no evidence that I've seen convincing that he had marital problems or any. I mean, if you look at his videos, yeah, he's fixing air conditioners. That doesn't seem like something of a deranged radical or anything.
Okay,
I think we see what we want
quick
to see.
response from Philip, if you don't mind.
I didn't say that it was a deranged radical, and I didn't say that that was definitely what happened. I said of all of the scenarios that have been put forward, I think it's the most plausible one. I think there are a lot of other scenarios that could equally have been at play. I mean, one of the things that I've spoken about right from the get-go is that given that airport security is very concerned about the insider threat in general, I'm concerned about the possibility of somebody having infiltrated themselves inside the avionics bay and being able to have fed information into the flight computers that may have overridden anything that the captain tried to do.
Right.
I'm not saying that I think that's what did happen. I'm saying that it's just because it hasn't happened in the past doesn't mean that it couldn't happen.
Right, so this is, Philip, this is where you and Jeff actually agree that this possibility should be looked at much more closely. Let's just explain, though, Jeff, for our viewers, what does Philip mean, infiltrate or to get into the electric bay? What is that? What is this?
So almost every airplane that exists can only be flown from the cockpit. The 777 is different. It's a transitional technology. It happens to have an unlocked hatch at the front of the passenger cabin, which is unlocked. You can go down through it and have root level access to all the computers that control everything on the plane, including communications and flight surface movement. And basically, it's possible, and I actually have a patent application in the German patent office right now for a device that will allow you from the electronics bay to control the plane. You can also alter this Inmarsat data that we talked about before. And so it is quite actually plausible and physically possible for this plane not to have been on the southern seabed at all, which is maybe why we didn't find it.
John, what do you make of this? I can see you virulently disagree that someone could have got into the electric bay and essentially flown the vehicle beyond the pilot's wishes up north to Kazakhstan.
I don't think that there's anywhere close to an amount of evidence to make that even a plausible theory. I think this, one, you need to understand, when the airplane made the turn, it flew directly across the boundary, it's called a Flight Information Region, an FIR boundary, between Vietnam and Malaysia. It goes down to an island, it goes halfway out into a bay, it turns northwest bound, precisely following that FIR boundary, and then turns offshore for 300 miles. 300 miles is exactly how the distance that ground radar could see the airplane. And at that point, it then turns south. Right? It's a commanded movement by someone who knows and understands exactly where those FIR boundary lines are. And so when you look carefully at the route flown, it was somebody in the airplane that had knowledge of, one, how to turn the transponder and parts of the ACARS unit off. And secondly, where the FIR boundary lines were and exactly how to get the airplane to do and fly that specific route.
And John, that couldn't be a hijacker of some kind?
No, there's no indication of anyone on the airplane having that level of knowledge. This is a very deep level of knowledge on a Boeing 777. The first officer, qualified pilot, he would not have that level of knowledge. The captain, however, as a veteran 777 pilot, could in fact find that information. So he had access and he had ability. He's the only person in the world that did.
Jeff, a quick rebuttal.
Well, obviously, if this was hijacked by a third party, it was done by an extremely sophisticated, indeed necessarily state-level actor. This kind of thing has been quite prevalent in the decade and a half since, not a decade and a half, 12 years. And so to say, well, I can't imagine it happening is a very thin line of defense.
Philip, we're coming towards the end of the program. From what I understand of your research and your experience, it is actually more frequent than we are led to believe from the media that pilots sometimes take drastic, catastrophic actions.
Well, absolutely. I mean, pilots are human beings, and some pilots may be experiencing periods of poor mental health, as can anybody in any profession. And I think if we look back at the post-September the 11th era, when all of the focus has been on trying to prevent terrorist attacks taking place, if we actually look at the reality is, it's quite possible that more lives have been lost on board commercial airliners as a result of aircraft-assisted than because of terrorism. I mean, we had the Mozambique Airlines aircraft that crashed en route from Mozambique to Angola, crashed in Namibia in 2013. Only 16 months later, we had the loss of German wings on a flight from Spain to Germany, crashed in the Alps. Quite probably the loss of China Eastern Airlines only 3 years ago was the result of aircraft assisted. Final report's not out yet. If we add in MH370, and I do think that aircraft assisted is the most likely of all of the scenarios to be true. We don't know. I am keeping an open mind. Then, you know, the reality is that this isn't a challenge that the industry faces. And I understand why pilots are very resistant to having that debate about it, or certainly having a public debate about it, because they want the general public to have faith in the people at the controls of the aircraft. But we also have to recognize that pilots may be reluctant to seek help when they're experiencing poor mental health, because any sign of weakness could result in them being grounded temporarily or possibly permanently, and them losing their careers as a result. But it is an issue that we have to focus on.
John, just a final and very brief answer, if you don't mind. The black box has been down in the water, most likely, for the past 12 years, seawater. If it is recovered, will it give us any information?
Great question. There is not an answer to it. It is far beyond its design limit. I'm hopeful, because these things are very, very well made, that there would be data that could be extracted, but we're in uncharted territory, so we don't know.
John Cox, Philip Baum, and Jeff Wise, thank you all very much for your analysis today. Really appreciate it. And thank you at home and on your phones for watching. If you want to see this episode or any of our previous episodes, go to our channel on YouTube. Just type in Nexus TRT World. Till next week then, goodbye.